2025 has already been a busy year for WWE when it comes to signing talent that used to work for All Elite Wrestling. Whether it's Penta, Rey Fenix, Ricky Starks, Malachi Black, or Miro, WWE is certainly in the middle of a signing spree from their top competitor, All Elite Wrestling. Therefore, with that in mind, what other names could be set to leave AEW if they haven't already and jump ship over to Triple H's World Wrestling Entertainment? We'll let you know some names in this countdown video. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of stories to get into in the world of professional wrestling. Before we get into today's countdown video, a reminder, you can join the WN 365 roster. Just click that join button. The link's in the video description below. You can also scan the QR code when it appears on the sidebar. Speaking of that very sidebar that you can see right here, you can see all of the details for upcoming watch-alongs, whether they're both nights of WrestleMania, NXT Stand and Deliver, select episodes of Monday Night Raw and Friday Night SmackDown, along with other shows set to be added soon. So if you haven't already, you can subscribe right there as we get closer to 21,000 subscribers, less than 300 to go until 21,000. So if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe and join the ever-expanding WNU, that being the Wrestle News universe. Now, into today's countdown video, let's talk about some names that could be set to leave All Elite Wrestling and join WWE in the near future. As I mentioned in the intro for this video, 2025 has been a busy year. At the time of recording this video, we're only in April, and we've seen the likes of Penta, Rey Fenix, Ricky Starks, Malachi Black, Miro, all signed with WWE. Some have debuted already on WWE television, like Penta, like Rey Fenix, like Ricky Starks, winning an NXT North American Championship. Others are yet to debut at the time of recording this video, or return in the case of Malachi Black and Miro. But it's led to a wider conversation. Could there be more names set to follow these former AEW stars out of All Elite Wrestling and then quickly sign with the main competitor, that being WWE? Let's get into some names that could be expected to jump ship soon, beginning with Britt Baker. Now, Britt Baker's status in All Elite Wrestling has been something of a big question for quite some time, hasn't it? Of course, it's been certainly a wild post around sort of 12 months for Britt Baker. She was off television for a lengthy amount of time, close to a year, and then she returned to AEW TV in June, late June of 2024 at the Forbidden Door pay-per-view. She made her return after over 9 months of hiatus away from AEW TV. She interrupted the TBS and newly crowned New Japan Strong Women's Champion Mercedes Moné. On the following episode of Dynamite, she stated that she'd been sidelined by 2 herniated discs, a torn hip labrum. She then suffered a transient ischemic attack, which was kind of a mini stroke in November that further sidelined her for the first half of 2024. This then led to this feud with Mercedes Moné that was going to lead to this match at AEW All in London. But along the way, there was more rumors of backstage problems, backstage heat, and a suspension as well. Because what happened was that in August, just again about a month or so after she had returned to the company, it was reported that Baker had been suspended after a backstage altercation with MJF and his real-life girlfriend, Alicia Atout. Now, she did have the match eventually. She did return to AEW television, had the match at AEW All in London in 2024 at Wembley Stadium. She was defeated by Mercedes Moné. Then in November, because we didn't see her for a while after the show at Wembley Stadium, then in November, she defeated Penelope Ford. After the match, she was confronted by Serena Deeb, in which Baker responded by saying nobody cares repeatedly towards Deeb and the camera. Some thought it was part of the storyline, some people thought it was a shoot, and it was disrespectful to a veteran, a well-known wrestler, and a very accomplished wrestler in Serena Deeb. And as of April 2025, the time recording this video, that's the last time we've seen Britt Baker on AEW TV. So that's like 5 months. We're closing in on nearly half a year of not seeing Britt Baker on AEW television. In the meantime, she's been doing projects outside of wrestling. She was in Cobra Kai. She's filming other TV shows and movies. But there have been these reports, and they tend to sort of peak and valley at different points, suggesting that she's on her way out of AEW. There was one report and rumor that suggests that Tony Khan had it with Britt Baker and he was going to let her go. That was quickly squashed and said, no, that's not the case. She is still under contract. But we have seen various times with names that have eventually gone on to leave AEW that they can just be sidelined and they can just be put on the shelf until their contracts expire, and then eventually they join WWE. This year, we've seen names like some of them I mentioned earlier, like Rey Fenix, like Miro, and others that did have time left in their contracts. Eventually, they requested their release, and it took a while, but they were granted it by Tony Khan and eventually ended up joining WWE. And maybe that might be the case with Britt Baker, which would certainly be a massive surprise considering she was one of the first names to join AEW back in January of 2019. In addition to that, she was really the initial babyface that the women's division was built around in All Elite Wrestling. Didn't really work out as a babyface, turned into a heel, but a very well-respected heel, a very popular heel, and really found her groove and developed a lot. So she is an AEW original, but like many AEW originals, it has kind of soured for her, and many are wondering just how long she has left as being All Elite. And if she does leave AEW, many think she could be a welcome addition to the WWE women's division. So could Britt Baker eventually be on her way to WWE? Next up, we talk about Saraya, the former page in WWE. Of course, she's now no longer with All Elite Wrestling, and it's an interesting one because I think a lot of people do expect Saraya to eventually go back to the place that made her famous. It might not be immediately, it might not even be this year, but feels like it's going to happen at some point. Now, Saraya came into AEW after her contract expired in July 2022. Now, in June of 2022, Paige announced her departure from WWE. It was effective on the 7th of July when her contract would expire. She'd been with the company for 11 years, WWE, and it was quite surprising at the time, and many people had thought that was interesting. Of course, this was around the time that Vince McMahon was exiting the company and Triple H was just getting creative control over the product. There were reports at the time suggesting that Triple H and WWE had reached out to Paige, suggesting that, hey, actually, do you want to come back? They were bringing back a lot of superstars at that period of time, like Karrion Kross, like Hit Row, like Bray Wyatt, and others. So lots of names were coming back to the company that had been let go, and reportedly Triple H had reached out to Paige and said, do you want to come back? We'll look to getting you cleared. We'll see how your neck's obviously looking. Of course, she had been forced to retire back in 2018 after suffering a neck injury towards the end of 2017. So by that point, she hadn't been able to wrestle for 4 or 5 years, but WWE would look at it and see if they could clear her. Paige, she turned that down, says she wanted to do projects outside of wrestling, which eventually led to her signing with AEW. She made her debut at the Grand Slam edition of Dynamite in September of 2022 and eventually did get cleared to have her first match in several years against Britt Baker at Full Gear that very year in 2022. And you could argue that maybe her run in AEW didn't live up to the hype of maybe the matches people thought that we were going to see from the former Divas champion in WWE in All Elite Wrestling. But still, she was still successful. She's a former AEW Women's World Champion, winning the championship in her home country of England at AEW All In 2023, AEW's biggest ever show. But again, it just never really got going for her, and it felt like her time had not kind of passed her, but the level of professional wrestling had kind of ascended her, maybe because of ring rust or concerns about her neck. She wasn't wrestling all the time, and her matches certainly weren't as intense as they used to be, and it just never felt like it got going. Now, she had her final match for AEW in October of 2024 at Title Tuesday. It was an edition of Dynamite. She competed in a 4-way match to earn an opportunity to face Mariah May at Wrestle Dream for the AEW Women's World Championship. It was won by Willow Nightingale. That would end up being Saraya's final appearance in AEW. In November of the same year, 2024, she did an interview and she announced she would be taking a hiatus from wrestling to focus on other projects. And in March of 2025, she announced her departure from AEW, ending her near 3-year tenure with the promotion. Now, she did stress that there was no ill feeling. It wasn't because of Tony Khan, and she could see herself maybe going back to AEW, but she was certainly taking a break from wrestling this year. But she's also been very open about suggesting she could go back to WWE, again, the place that made her famous. Now, she was forced to retire due to a very serious neck injury, and despite the fact that she was cleared to wrestle once more, there still has been the suggestion that this was maybe a bit of a reprieve for her, but she would still have a limited time inside the squared circle, and she is, again, working with time that she doesn't really have. So if she only has a handful of matches left in her career, then maybe she'll want to do it on the largest stage possible. The place that made her famous, that being WWE. Maybe one final WrestleMania match, or maybe one final match in her home country for WWE, something like that. Certainly someone that was a big influence in the women's revolution in WWE back when Triple H was running NXT and her transition to the main roster as well. So certainly do feel like Saraya Paige could end up going back to WWE one day. Now, Powerhouse Hobbs. Now, Powerhouse Hobbs, whenever you do lists like this, you feel like he always gets thrown in there because he feels like someone that WWE would just constantly be looking at. Now, Powerhouse Hobbs, in comparison to maybe some of the other names we're going to be talking about on this list, always feels less likely because when you're talking about people like Britt Baker, like we spoke about earlier on, she's not been used on TV for close to 6 months. When we talk about Saraya, she's already left AEW and she's already been open about possibly going back to WWE. Powerhouse Hobbs is different because while some may say that maybe he hasn't been booked the best in AEW, he is still used pretty frequently on AEW TV. Now, let's just take 2024 for an example. At the beginning of the year, around sort of April time, around a year ago at the time of recording this video, on an episode of Dynamite, Hobbs unsuccessfully challenged John Moxley for the IWGP World Heavyweight Championship. During this, he sustained a knee injury and he required surgery. He'd be out for the majority of the year. He came back in November. He was a mystery partner for Ricochet, defeated Konosuke Takeshita and Kyle Fletcher, and he also ended his tenure with the Don Callis family. He was part of that faction whilst before his injury. He also challenged Takeshita for the AEW International Championship. He was now working as a babyface. This year, he won the Casino Gauntlet match to earn an AEW World Championship opportunity against John Moxley. He failed to win the title the following week at Dynamite Maximum Carnage. He then transitioned into a feud with Big Bill of the Learning Tree. He defeated Bill in a street fight in February on Dynamite. We haven't really seen him since, but again, he is used pretty frequently on AEW television, and he's a name certainly that when it comes to his run in AEW, he was one of these names that kind of came in during the pandemic. He was working mainly on AEW Dark, but certainly transitioned into working on the main shows more often. He was part of Team Taz initially. After that kind of all ended, he was with QTV, with QT Marshall. That's where he won the TNT Championship. So he is a former TNT champion. Eventually, as I mentioned, he transitioned into the Don Callis family. And there has been steady growth of him being featured in higher profile matches, big matches. Still, some have suggested that his booking has been inconsistent and maybe he should be treated more like a monster. He's got a great physique, a great look. Certainly his promos are improving. And as I said, he has shown significant growth during his tenure in AEW. And some have wondered, why isn't he competing in main events? Why isn't he competing more regularly for the AEW World Championship like he has this year? But, because of his size, he does fit the traditional WWE model of having these big, sort of giant wrestlers, but we don't know more details as to when his contract expires or anything like that, but you just feel it's inevitable. If someone like Powerhouse Hobbs became available, WWE would be all over that opportunity. But as far as right now, we don't have any details as to when he would no longer be under an AEW contract. Let's move on and talk about Keith Lee, of course, a former WWE NXT superstar and someone that's just had a bit of a strange time in AEW, certainly. Now, in WWE, Keith Lee had his best run with who? Triple H as part of NXT, the black and gold brand, that being run by Triple H at the time, who now, of course, runs creative for the entirety of WWE. In fact, he was a double champion. Yeah, that's right. He defeated Adam Cole to win the NXT championship. At the time, he was the NXT North American champion. He became a double champion, was the first person ever to hold the NXT and NXT North American championship simultaneously. So obviously, a big fan of Keith Lee was Triple H. And during this period of time, around 2020, this is when, if you'd have told someone in 2020 Keith Lee isn't going to make it on the main roster, and in addition to that, he's going to be gone from WWE in under 2 years' time, you'd have said, that's crazy. Everyone thought this guy, because of his size, the fact he was able to do this athleticism and he was able to do these athletic spots and have these amazing matches, he was going to be set for superstardom. In fact, he was called up to the main roster in 2020 later on that year, and in fact, in his first pay-per-view match, premium live event match, he defeated Randy Orton, a future WWE Hall of Famer. But it just never really worked out. He was absent from WWE TV after contracting COVID, and he followed by a heart inflammation. So he returned on an episode of Raw back in 2021. I think it was, and then eventually he'd be changed to Keith Bearcat Lee or Bearcat Lee. It was part of a gimmick change, and it just never really worked out. Eventually, he was released by WWE in November of that year. He went to AEW, and many people once again shared the optimism that they had in his WWE run, saying finally he's going to be in main events. Finally, he's going to be competing for the World Championship. Initially, there was success. Initially, he formed the tag team Swerve in Our Glory with Swerve Strickland, a future AEW World Champion. They won the AEW World Tag Team Championships, and they were a very, very popular tag team. Eventually, they split, with Swerve turning on Keith Lee, forming the Mogul Affiliates. Less said about that, the better. But people thought, okay, this is a good rivalry, it was a good tag team, and this is good long-term storytelling. But it just never really worked out that. It was very stop-start. There were injuries and the match never happened for whatever reason. And he then eventually, towards the end of 2023, he just disappeared from AEW TV. At one point, he was set to face off against Strickland at AEW World's End in 2023, but he was withdrawn from the match due to an undisclosed injury. In early January 2024, it was announced that he had undergone double surgeries, and he hasn't been seen on AEW television since. At the time recording, that's well over a year. That's looking around sort of, 14, 15 months at the time recording this video, that Keith Lee just hasn't been on AEW television. Now, we don't know his AEW contract status. We don't know if because he's been off TV for well over a year, he's got well over a year of time added onto his contract, or if his contract's been allowed to continue to run. We just don't know. One would think, though, a bit like some of these other stars that were in AEW because they were let go from WWE, but their best WWE runs were under Triple H and NXT, a bit like Malachi Black, maybe a bit like Miro, etc. Some would think that maybe that's the reason why Keith Lee would want to go back to WWE if indeed he got the chance to. In addition to that, his partner, that being Michin Mia Yim, works for the company as well, so it would make traveling a lot easier too. But we also just don't know at the time recording really the latest updates or status of Keith Lee's health, his recovery from those surgeries and anything else that goes with it. He mainly competed in tag team matches, not really singles matches in AEW, so we don't know reasons as to why that is. So there's still so much uncertainty regarding Lee and his future in AEW, but because of that, that leads to people still linking him with a WWE return. And finally, could we see Chris Jericho on his way back to WWE? Now, previously, you would think this one's unlikely. Chris Jericho was one of the first names to sign with AEW when the company was launched in 2019. In fact, that was very surprising because Chris Jericho was a WWE guy. After signing with WWE in 1999, jumping from WCW in the process, Jericho then said he would never wrestle for another company than WWE. Now, eventually he broke that promise because he wrestled for New Japan, but then he kind of put a wrinkle in it and said, well, never another company in North America. But then that changed when he signed with AEW. And the reason he signed with AEW is because he felt like he was doing some of the best work of his entire pro wrestling career in WWE with the Festival of Friendship and the Best Friends angle with Kevin Owens. And at one point they were set to main event WrestleMania for the Universal Championship in 2017. It didn't happen in the end. Eventually he ended up going, second match, and Vince McMahon hated the match and he felt disrespected because of that, and he felt like WWE and Vince McMahon only viewed him in a certain light and he was going to prove them wrong. And he went to AEW and was instrumental in getting the company off the ground, being the first ever AEW World Champion, a bankable name that allowed companies like Warner Brothers Discovery, TNT, TBS to actually look at AEW as a viable commodity, put them on TV and deliver good ratings. He's, again, the first ever AEW World Champion because of that. And since then, he's basically done everything there is to do in AEW. In the first couple of years, Jericho still had something to offer. Name value, still had good matches and good programs. The issue is that in the years since then, Jericho has become what many wrestlers don't like to admit they could become as they get older, and that is a parody of themselves. Many have said that Jericho needs to hang it up, he needs to retire. At the time of recording, he's 54 years old. He will be 55 later this year, and regularly there are chants of please retire, and it's not really sort of a novelty. They're saying it because they mean it. His latest gimmick, the Learning Tree, was universally panned. People didn't like it, even though it was kind of a trolling character. And in 2025, his contract with AEW will be expiring. In 2022, it was reported that Jericho had signed a new 3-year contract with All Elite Wrestling, and at the time recording, there's just been this angle on television where he's dropped the Ring of Honor World Championship, and he says it's time for him to leave. In reality, he's going on tour with Fozzy. He still might actually be appearing on AEW television throughout the entirety of his tour because most of his Wednesdays are free. But Jericho also recently did an interview where he said he would be open to going back to WWE, which is kind of softening his stance that he had previously. Previously, he always said that he didn't think he'd go back to WWE because there was nothing for him to do there anymore. He had done it all. But it's really the same issue that he has in AEW. He's done it all. It feels like he's become stale. And as I mentioned, it becomes that he doesn't really fit there anymore and it's become a bit of a parody. Is the best thing for Jericho to do to go back to WWE and finish his career off there, have a Hall of Fame run, have a couple of more matches, and do what really made him so successful in the first place when it came to WWE later on in his career is go there for 3 months, do a character, then disappear for 3 months, 6 months, come back with a different character. That's what made him so successful. Whether it was, the best in the world, whether it was the Festival of Friendship, whether it was all of these different characters, that he went away and came back with, the guy with the light up jacket, all of those kind of things, it worked because people grew fond because they didn't get to see Jericho that often. Whereas since 2019, we've seen Jericho every single week on AEW TV. He's tried different characters. Some were great at the start, Le Champion, a little bit of the bubbly, the Inner Circle. It felt like everything hit. And then really from the Jericho Appreciation Society on, it kind of just felt like a steady decline downhill, didn't it? So could we see Chris Jericho, but someone who previously has had a bit of heat with Triple H, could he be on his way back to WWE? We'll wait and see. So there you go, guys. There's 5 names that could be set to leave AEW and join WWE. What do you think of those names? Are some more likely than others? Let me know your thoughts, your hot takes, your opinions on all of them in the comment section below. Be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe. As you can see right there, we are less than 300 subscribers to go until 21,000. So if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe. Join the WN365 roster. Click the join button and you can get your badges, your emojis, and your exclusive members-only content. All of the watch-along details are in the sidebar. And as I said, subscribe, click the notification bell. You'll be notified when new news videos or countdown videos get uploaded. And I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.